You know, oh shit. Chat? I have a read on this. Keep safe our melody, good pilgrim. You shall likely be the last to receive it. Notice how this lad, we can just keep it here. Notice how this lad is saying he's sick, sounds sick, hiding behind a sheet, backlit, definitely. He is evoking the whole leprosy thing, you know, when a ruler in a medieval fantasy era had leprosy and they're hiding behind, you know, the curtains around the bed, and you can just hear them rasping away, a wasting illness, right? And outside, we have a spool of silk and this metronome thing that seems to feed it at a steady pace. Now, spontaneously, one might think that he is weaving. Permit me to give you another read of this. This thread is not meant for tapestry. This thread, this spool, and this metronome feeding machine is an IV. It's an intravenous drip, keeping him alive. It's life support. That's what's happening here. He's being fed thread just so that he can last a little longer. That's correct, probably. I think so. Just look at how everything is set up. You have the sick sheet, you have the sick bed. He's obviously not feeling too well. That spool hangs off a plinth almost the same way that you would expect an IV bag to do. And that feeder, that metronome thing, making sure to feed him, it's like the drip. I don't know the speed of the drip, and I'm assuming that could be adjusted. But from a platonic ideal, that certainly seems to keep the pace of an IV drip. That is really cool. That is great environmental storytelling. This is how you tell great story without being blatant about it. You give these little treats, and especially, again, now we're almost talking a little bit structuralism here. What you do with a structuralist reading is essentially reading the symbology of a piece, what items mean in context, or how they refer to one another as binary pairings. In this scenario, we've slowly been led to believe that the silk has life-reinforcing abilities, or animating abilities. And still, we've been fed with a lot of weaving as a verb, but just with the setup of likening the spool to an IV drip, just hanging it up in the same manner, and dressing the circumstances in such a way that makes it feel hospital rather than loom or weaver, it reframes our understanding of the objects. This is actually a prime example of a structuralist construction of environmental storytelling, where you undermine the traditional associations to an object to make that object take on another meaning. And here's the kicker. I'm gonna remove myself so we don't have to hear that quite as prevalent. I see you, Underdark. I'll get to you real soon. So what you do, what you accomplish. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a foundational bit of academia that I think it came about at the same time as structuralism. I do believe that it's Levi Strauss, the father, the granddaddy of structuralism, who founded these theories. I do believe so. He was a semiologue. Semiologue, is that how you call it? Either way, he was a professor of signs and their meaning. Now, what do we mean with signs? Well, anything from a letter to a word, to a sound, to a picture. And he developed this theory of the symbolized and the symbolizing. That is to say, the thing and the word, and the difference there between. The word tree is what symbolizes, while the tree itself is what is symbolized. And he has this grand. I haven't read the theory in. Well, I haven't read his thesis papers. I haven't read any Levi Strauss. Finnick Twitch was in there. He's read some Levi Strauss at this point. But that is the tenets of semiology. I think that's the word for it. The academic field of understanding semiotes. That is to say, these symbols, where a signifier signifies a thing. The signifier and the signified. What you do in this era of literature, not that you started doing it, you've done it before and you still doing it, but where literary science sort of glommed down on the field at this point, and we're talking 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s was the big field. Postmodernism started off in the late 60s. Is the study of, as we've talked about, binary pairings, but that uses the tenets and the understanding of semiology. I think that's the word. Where we start creating these Venn diagrams between the signifier and the signified and other signified things. So in this case, the picture of the spool with thread on it would signify weaving or constructing or creating a membrane, right? That's for clothes or curtains or whatever have you. But suddenly by placing that spool, essentially switching out the IV bag for the spool, suddenly we have created this Venn diagram of signifier and signified, where the signification of the spool becomes undermined by it being out of context, being used out of context. So suddenly it still has the connections to weaving tapestry, to creating this cloth or this cover, this curtain over reality, which is essentially what you do when you create clothes or curtains. So when you weave, you create a dressing for a thing. You create essentially a cover or a hiding for a thing. Those strands, but those connections to the original signifier are still there because the author still used the spool. There's intention there. So those connections are still present. But when you replace the IV bag with that, then it also connects to other signifiers or signified things. In this case, life support, medical treatment, the slow wasting away of someone dying of a terminal illness. And suddenly what you have accomplished by replacing the IV bag and putting up the spool, by replacing the signifier, or putting the signifier in a place where it quote-unquote doesn't belong, is you've built a bridge between those, or these disparate signified things. That is to say, cover something up, create, to weave, to sheath something, and give life support, maintain, stopping or at least slowing the inevitable wasting away of something. And suddenly you have connected these two disparate signified things, put them together into one word, all by creating this dissonance in where you place the signifier. That's the fundamental tenets of the binary pairing, the structuralist analysis that literary science does, and also by using Levi Strauss's school of semiology. It's pretty fucking neat. It's a simple thing, right? Technically, it's a very simple thing. You take away a thing you would expect to be there and you put another in. And suddenly you create these bridges between, well, these symbolical bridges that you otherwise probably, couldn't. I wouldn't want to say that you couldn't get them otherwise, but you surely wouldn't be able to get them as neatly and as elegantly in place. That is pretty fucking cool. That is elegant writing.